Hello, brothers and sisters. I hope you're all doing fine from wherever you're watching me from. Now, Ibrahim Traore, the president of Burkina Faso, is on the spotlight again for having angered France President Emmanuel Macron. Now, Ibrahim Traore has been doing tremendous work in Burkina Faso. He has been calling out on African Americans and Africa diaspora to come back home and invest. Now, he has been calling for the unity of black people and the unity of Africa as a continent to form one unified country with one currency, one president, one military force, and one language. Now, this has angered Emmanuel Macron and the likes of Donald Trump and other leaders from the Western countries. Now, they do not want to see him existing in power. So let's watch this video, then have a very quick discussion at the end of it. Thank you so much.
Revolutionary leader Captain Ibrahim Traoré has delivered a decisive blow to foreign interests with a historic land reform policy that is reshaping the economic and political landscape of the country. Under his leadership, the Burkina government has taken full ownership of all land, making it legally impossible for foreigners to hold title deeds. This bold move has sent shockwaves across Africa, causing panic among Western investors and politicians who have long relied on Africa's weak land policies to secure massive agricultural and resource extraction deals. While critics have rushed to label this policy as dictatorial, the Burkina government has firmly defended the decision, arguing that it is a necessary and strategic measure to safeguard national sovereignty, prevent land exploitation, and ensure that the country's resources are used for the benefit of its people. On February 5th, 2025, the Burkina Council of Ministers approved a groundbreaking land reform bill that permanently shifts land ownership from private hands, especially foreign entities, to the government of Burkina Faso. The bill was formally enacted in a meeting attended by President Traoré, where Minister of Economy, Dr. Abubakar Nakanabo, outlined the key objectives of the reform. Through this bill, land now belongs to the state, Minister Nakanabo declared. The bill introduces three major changes to Burkina Faso's land ownership system. 1. The state now owns all land. No individual business or foreign entity can claim absolute ownership of land. 2. Foreigners are barred from holding title deeds. They can no longer inherit or permanently control land in Burkina Faso. 3. A long-term lease system is introduced. Instead of land ownership, both locals and foreigners can apply for long-term leases ranging from 18 to 99 years, primarily for agriculture, industrial development, and public infrastructure projects. This policy fundamentally alters Burkina Faso's historical land tenure system, which had been based on customary land rights. For decades, land ownership in Burkina Faso was rooted in customary traditions, where local communities controlled and allocated land based on ancestral claims. Land was passed down through generations and families maintained a strong sense of security over their lands. However, this system was deeply flawed due to lack of legal documentation. Most landholders had no official records proving ownership, making land disputes common. Elites exploiting the system, wealthy individuals, including politicians and business moguls, manipulated customary rights to amass vast amounts of land while local farmers struggled. Foreign entities acquiring land through corrupt deals. Western corporations, Chinese investors, and other foreign groups quietly bought land, taking advantage of weak land policies to control fertile agricultural areas and resource-rich regions. The new law eliminates these loopholes by transferring all land ownership to the state, allowing the government to regulate and distribute land fairly. While critics, especially from Western media and political circles, have labelled this bill as an authoritarian power grab, the reality is that Burkina Faso is simply reclaiming its sovereignty over its land. For too long, Africa's weak land policies have allowed multinational corporations and foreign governments to exploit its natural resources, with little benefit to local populations. By placing land under state control, the government of Burkina Faso can now prevent foreign exploitation. Foreign investors will no longer be able to purchase vast tracts of land for commercial farming, mining, or real estate speculation. The state can now allocate land more efficiently for public infrastructure, industrial projects, and agricultural development. Resolve land disputes fairly. By centralizing land control, conflicts between farmers, herders, and indigenous communities can be better managed.
Oh well, you've seen it all. Ibrahim Traore is making a bold move. This is a bold move, saying there is no place for external influence or external power. There's no place for Western power. There's no place for anyone to come to their land to take land that is theirs. And I'm wondering why there is dispute. I'm wondering why they're not happy with this reform. Because let's face it, if you do not have ulterior motives for getting this land that are not yours in the first place, why would you say what he's doing is wrong? He's doing it for the good of the people. And Africa needs to understand that they are of themselves self-sufficient. They are sufficient of themselves. And these guys actually benefit a lot from Africa. So Africa needs to know that. And then girdle up their belts and go about their activities without having to depend on these people. I love what Ibrahim Traore did.
Have you heard that Burkina Faso has taken control of its gold mines and started extracting its own gold? Not only that, but unlike in the past, when raw gold was exported at low prices, the country has now launched an ambitious plan to refine and process the gold itself, producing hundreds of gold bars every month. This shift is transforming Burkina Faso's gold industry, cutting off French and other Western corporations from accessing its resources. Previously, gold was mined within Burkina Faso, but sent abroad to be refined in Western facilities before being sold on international markets. This system benefited foreign economies, while Burkina Faso remained stuck in poverty. Now Ibrahim Traore has pledged to put an end to this cycle permanently. But how exactly is the raw gold being processed, filtered, purified, and transformed into gleaming gold bars?
This is the journey to one Africa.
Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traoré, laid the foundation stone for a national gold refinery with an annual refining capacity of 150 tons. The facility, whose total cost has not been disclosed, will produce its first gold 11 months from now. The project is developed in partnership with Marina Gold, a local company. The refinery will be the first in the country. It will house a jewelry store and the future headquarters of the Société Nationale des Substances Précieuses, which oversees the project on behalf of the state. The facility should create 100 direct jobs and over 5,000 indirect jobs, according to the authorities. We will no longer be refining our gold abroad, but have it refined. And we will know what the real value of the raw gold that comes out of our mines is, stressed President Traoré in a speech read on his behalf by the Minister of Mines, Simon Pierre Boussim. Gold is Burkina Faso's leading export product. The country produced 57.6 tons in 2022, down 14% year-on-year. Local processing is gradually becoming a priority for several African mining countries, which have long exported their raw production. In the gold sector, particularly, most of the continent's producers have their gold processed in refineries in South Africa, Switzerland, or China. As Africa's third-largest gold producer by 2022, Mali could follow in the footsteps of its neighbor Burkina Faso, following the signing this week of a memorandum of understanding with Russia for the construction of a gold refinery. Burkina Faso, a landlocked West African nation, is a significant gold producer, ranking 4th in Africa and 15th globally in 2023, with gold contributing 16% of GDP and 80% of exports. Ibrahim Traore, born in 1988 and educated in geology, became the interim leader after a September 2022 coup, ousting the previous interim president. At 36, he is the world's second youngest state leader, known for his Marxist activism and focus on resource sovereignty. In August 2024, Traore's government nationalized the Bungu and Wagnion gold mines, previously sold by UK-based Endeavour Mining, for $300 million in 2023. The government acquired them for $80 million, a strategic move to reclaim mineral wealth, inspired by Pan-Africanist ideals. This action, part of broader efforts including expelling French military presence in February 2023 and forming the alliance of Sahel states with Niger and Mali. in July 2024 aimed to increase government revenue for sectors like education and healthcare. Construction of Burkina Faso's first gold refinery began in November 2023, inaugurated by Traore, with an expected start date of October 2024. Partnering with the local company Marina Gold, the refinery has a capacity of 150 tons per year, 400 kilo a day of 99% pure gold, creating 100 direct and 5,000 indirect jobs. Construction of Burkina Faso's first gold refinery begins. Traoré emphasized local refining to know the true gold value and reduce fraudulent exports linked to terrorism. First gold bars in February 2025. By February 2025, the refinery, operational since October 2024, produced its first gold bars from the nationalized mines, marking a historic milestone. This followed the receipt of 93.197 kilo of gold bars from processed mining residues in December 2024, processed by Golden Hand SA. The event, witnessed by Traore, symbolized economic independence, with potential to fund national development amid security challenges, surprising economic impact. It's notable that acquiring the mines for $80 million, compared to their $300 million sale price, could significantly boost government revenue, given gold's $6 billion annual value.
Burkina Faso is making great moves, and this is all thanks to young leader Ibrahim Traore. According to reports, Burkina Faso's new land policy, recently enacted by President Ibrahim Traore, significantly restricts foreign ownership of rural land, essentially prohibiting foreigners from holding title deeds on rural land. Aiming to strengthen land governance and ensure the state maintains control over national resources, this policy also includes formally recognizing customary land rights of indigenous communities and allowing long-term leases for agricultural purposes only. This is incredible news, considering how a lot of African countries to this day don't have majority of the land ownership, especially those that were colonized. The people that came in and colonized the locals, the indigenous people, took over and for the most part didn't return it. So a lot of locals and indigenous people on the continent of Africa are pushed aside. They don't own a lot of their own land. And aside from that, these foreign multinational companies, mining companies, FMCGs, they'll come into a country, buy land, even though they're not locals, they have ownership, they can run it, they can do whatever they please with that land. And that's something that we see almost everywhere across Africa, except for a few countries that make it very hard for foreigners to own land in their countries. So Burkina Faso, thanks to, as I said, the young leader Ibrahim Traore, to introduce this policy is going to help the people of Burkina Faso. It is prioritizing its own people, and this is great news. And also in that policy, it recognizes customary land rights of indigenous communities and allowing long-term leases for agricultural purposes only. So it is also considering the indigenous people. We're talking about, the Maasais being kicked in East Africa. We talked about this before. The Maasais getting kicked so that big company can come and do something with that land. But the people, the indigenous people, are getting kicked out. And this is a battle that we're fighting right now in 2025. So for Burkina Faso to introduce this, it shows that the priority of that government is the people, and we love to see it. And because of this new land policy, there are impacts, of course, like anything else. So for example, it is going to reduce land grabbing. It will limit foreign land ownership. The policy could potentially curb large-scale land acquisitions by foreign investors. It can also improve food security. By prioritizing local farmers' access to land, the policy might contribute to enhanced food production. And it is also going to address land tenure issues through formal recognition of customary rights and it could potentially reduce land-related conflicts. So this policy is going to change the people of Burkina Faso's lives for the better, and it needs to be appreciated and applauded. This is truly inspiring, and I hope other countries are taking notes, because the issue of land is not a simple thing. People go to war for that. People go to conflict and unalive one another, even if they're in the same country. So for Ibrahim Traore to introduce this, it is going to curb and dodge a lot of issues that might arise and that have already come up. So yeah, well done to...
How can you impose democracy by killing millions of people? It's a dictatorship, not democracy. You can't impose it. Those who call themselves Democrats have seen scenes where people were prevented from joining assemblies. We've seen scenes where forces landed in assemblies to force deputies to take texts. We've seen more terrible scenes where people kill their demonstrators. But they call themselves Democrats, and we're called Persians. If that's democracy, I repeat, we don't want this democracy.
Before delving into the powerful speech recently delivered by Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, it's equally critical to focus on another nation grappling with escalating political strife and societal unrest. Kenya, East Africa's economic powerhouse, finds itself in the throes of a dark chapter, marked by the unexplained disappearances of dozens of its citizens. Since June 2024, at least 82 Kenyans have vanished, with 6 cases reported in just the past 2 weeks. This wave of abductions has ignited widespread fear and drawn sharp criticism from opposition leaders, human rights groups, and the general public. Many attribute the disappearances to state-led efforts to quell dissent, pointing fingers squarely at the administration of President William Ruto. While the country has long been regarded as a stable democracy in a volatile region, this image belies a history of contentious elections, police brutality, and crackdowns on opposition. President William Ruto's rise to power in 2022 came after a tightly contested election that saw his main rival, Raila Odinga, challenging the results in court. Although the judiciary upheld Ruto's victory, the political climate remained tense. The president's subsequent policies, including controversial tax reforms and a perceived consolidation of power, have fueled widespread discontent. The abductions, which began in mid-2024, are the latest manifestation of Kenya's fraught political climate. Human rights advocates argue that these disappearances are symptomatic of a larger systemic problem, the erosion of democratic freedoms and the weaponization of state security forces to suppress dissent. The protests that erupted in June 2024 were initially sparked by a government proposal to introduce new taxes aimed at reducing Kenya's debt burden. The measures included increases in fuel levies and other essential goods, which disproportionately affected the country's poor and middle-class populations. What began as localized demonstrations quickly morphed into a nationwide movement, drawing participants from diverse ethnic and political backgrounds. Protesters decried not only the tax hikes, but also rising unemployment, corruption, and the government's perceived failure to address pressing social issues. As the protests gained momentum, the government's response became increasingly authoritarian. Security forces were deployed to disperse crowds, often using excessive force. Reports of arbitrary arrests, harassment, and beatings became commonplace. It was against this backdrop that the abductions began to occur. The abductions have followed a disturbingly consistent pattern. Victims are often young men and women who have been active in organizing protests or voicing criticism of the government, particularly on social media platforms. Witnesses describe incidents in which individuals are seized by armed men in unmarked vehicles, sometimes in broad daylight. In many cases, the abductors identify themselves as police officers, though the government has denied any involvement. The families of the disappeared are left with few answers as law enforcement agencies refuse to investigate or provide information. Human rights organisations, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, have documented these cases extensively. According to their reports, many of the victims are subjected to torture, held in secret detention facilities, or summarily executed. Kenya's police and intelligence services have long been accused of engaging in extrajudicial practices, including enforced disappearances and summary executions. These allegations date back to the 1980s and 1990s, when the Moi regime used similar tactics to suppress political opposition. Under President Ruto's administration, these practices appear to have been revived, albeit with a greater emphasis on targeting digital dissenters. Analysts suggest that the rise of social media as a tool for political mobilization has prompted the government to adopt more covert methods of repression. A recent report by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, KNCHR, highlights the role of a shadowy police unit believed to be responsible for the disappearances. The report alleges that this unit operates under the direct supervision of senior government officials who view the abductions as a necessary measure to maintain order. The disappearances have provoked a strong reaction from the Kenyan public. Protesters have taken to the streets in cities across the country, demanding accountability and the release of those who have been abducted. Opposition leaders have called for independent investigations, while civil society organisations have organised vigils and awareness campaigns. The international community has also weighed in, with several countries and organisations expressing concern over the deteriorating human rights situation in Kenya. The United Nations has urged the government to respect its citizens' rights to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. Despite these efforts, the government has shown little willingness to change course. In public statements, President Ruto has dismissed allegations of state involvement in the abductions as politically motivated and accused the opposition of seeking to destabilize the country. The crisis in Kenya is symptomatic of a larger trend in East Africa, where governments increasingly resort to authoritarian measures to maintain control. Similar patterns of political repression have been observed in Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda, raising concerns about the erosion of democratic norms in the region. For Kenya, the stakes are particularly high. As a regional hub for trade, diplomacy and security, the country's stability is critical to the broader East African community. The abductions not only threaten Kenya's internal cohesion, but also undermine its international reputation as a bastion of democracy. Addressing the crisis will require a multi-pronged approach. First and foremost, the government must acknowledge the severity of the problem and commit to transparent investigations into the disappearances. This will involve strengthening oversight mechanisms, reforming the security sector, and holding perpetrators accountable. Civil society will also play a crucial role in advocating for change. By amplifying the voices of victims' families and raising awareness about the issue, activists can pressure the government to take meaningful action. Finally, the international community must remain engaged, using diplomatic channels and economic incentives to encourage reforms. While external pressure alone is unlikely to resolve the crisis, it can serve as a catalyst for domestic change. The ongoing abductions in Kenya represent a profound challenge to the country's democratic fabric. As protests continue and public outrage grows, the government faces a stark choice.
More than any African president, Traoré has been the subject of devious assassination and destabilization plots. But thankfully, he has been able to scale through them up till now. And now he has devoted his time to investigating those responsible and removing them from their place of power. Recently, the local Burkinabe news revealed that the authorities in Burkina Faso have frozen the assets and economic resources of at least 113 individuals involved in the destabilization plot. But is that all that has been done to these coup and destabilization plotters? Let's find out. On November 19, 2024, the Burkinabe Minister of Economy, Dr. Abubakar Nakanabo, announced that an executive order had been signed by Traoré's administration. This order froze the assets and economic resources of at least 113 individuals and 2 legal entities. Among the 113 individuals are the former military junta Paul-Henri Damiba, the 2 former foreign affairs ministers, Gendarmerie General Jibril Bassol, journalists Alpha Barry, Abdoulaye Barry, Newton Ahmed Barry, and the former deputy mayor of Dori, Aziz Diallo. The order also affected some officers who have already been dismissed from the Burkinabe National Armed Forces. These military officers were Ahmed Kinda, the former commander of the National Theater Operations Command, COTN, Yves Didier Bamouni, and Romeo Uwoba, former commander of the Special Forces. Now, the order further revealed that all these people worked together to orchestrate the devious plan to destabilize Burkina Faso and overthrow President Traoré. The executive order also targeted armed terrorist groups that are active in Burkina Faso. According to the order, these groups are accused of participating in acts of terrorism or financing terrorism. But that's not all that has been done against these coup plotters. You see, the former Burkina Faso military junta, Paul-Henri Damiba, is the brain behind the recent assassination and coup plot against President Traoré. The most shocking thing is that he is currently in Togo and has been in Togo since 2022. This means that he orchestrated the attack on President Traoré while in Togo. Now, when news of the devious plot was first announced, the question on everyone's mind was, will he be brought to justice? This is a very valid question because it is a well-known fact that African leaders are good at evading the law and justice after committing crimes. However, the Burkinabe government recently announced that President Traoré is currently in discussions with the government of Togo to extradite the former military junta to Burkina Faso. The question is, will the discussions be successful and will he be brought to justice? Before we proceed, here is a reminder to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already. Now, in one of his speeches, Traoré revealed that the former military government did nothing to improve conditions for Burkina Faso's army, widely considered one of the weakest in Africa. In an interview, Traoré complained about the poor conditions and inadequate equipment of his troops in battle. He said, "I go out on patrols with my men and we lack basic logistics. In some villages, the trees have no leaves because people eat them. They eat weeds. We have been proposing solutions that could protect these people, but they have not been listened to. We have made so many proposals. Imagine the situation in which the army had to work." When Traoré saw that the old military junta was not doing anything, he staged a coup and overthrew Paul-Henri Damiba. Immediately after his downfall, the old military junta fled to Togo for refuge, and he has been there ever since. However, the former military government was not satisfied with the way things were going.
Brothers and sisters, I hope you are all doing fine from wherever you're watching me from. Now, Ibrahim Traoré has been doing whatever African continent has missed for the longest time. Now, he has been bringing changes in his own country. He has been bringing changes to the whole of the African continent. And you might be shocked because some other presidents, some other leaders in Africa still do not support him. They see him as a threat. Now, they see him as a threat because the presidents and the leaders of Africa have always aligned with the Western policies. They have always been puppets to the Western policies. So they have been doing whatever their masters want them to do in Africa. This is why it has been so difficult for Africa to unite, because every country has its own interest. Every leader, the people might be good, but the leaders, the people we call so leaders, because myself, I do not recognize some people as leaders because of whatever they have done to this motherland, that the motherland is suffering some bad policies and some bad decisions that were made to place the oppressor, to place their colonial master, to place those who put them in power. Now, this is why when someone like Ibrahim Traoré is coming out and saying Africa must remain to Africans and all French soldiers must leave Africa, all British soldiers must leave Africa, all American soldiers must leave Africa, and the African soil should remain to the African man, should remain to the African sister. This is whatever is pissing them off, because all these countries in Africa have army bases that do not belong to them. That US army bases are everywhere in Africa. French army bases are everywhere in West Africa. Belgium army bases are everywhere in the central zone of Africa. And when you go to the south, the Germany have taken over. And we are asking ourselves a question. Why are they training their armies in Africa? It is intelligence. They are collecting intelligent reports for their government. And the puppets know this because they have gone ahead and signed some secretive contracts that they can't disclose to the people, because these contracts have clauses that can annoy the people in the whole of the African continent. Now, when we see leaders like Ibrahim Traore coming out, exposing them to the people and telling the people the enemy number one, it's the African presidents, those who have been eroded, those who have no morals, those who have sold their conscience to the to the white oppressor, who really exploited and continues to exploit the continent of Africa. What do we mean when we say that we want Africa for African people? I know I'm talking about this because some other people feel like it is classifying some group of people. No, it is because our own brothers and sisters are facing the same problem, that we in Africa can't fight for our own. Like, we can't stand and fight the oppression, the exploitation of our mineral resources in our own country. Then we expect our brothers to fight the oppression in their countries. No, we are saying this. We are going to support someone like Ibrahim Traore. We, the youth of Africa, we, the millennials, we, the Gen Zs, all other these groups, the Gen X, the millennials should actually come into the movement and make sure Africa is going to be better, and make sure that this continent is going to be liberated. We've seen, we've experienced, we felt it, and it is time to act on it. Brothers and sisters, someone like Emmanuel Macron, I know the president of France, is so much upset with Ibrahim Traore, so much upset with how things are working in the West. Now, he had so much influence, and you've seen the presidents of Ghana, you've seen the presidents of Mali and all these countries before Ibrahim Traore formed the Sahel. They used to go on a single sermon to Emmanuel Macron. They were reporting to him directly. They were reporting to the White House in the US. They have been reporting to the European Union. And you know what? They have been doing this at the expense of the black people in Africa. They have left the colonial master to continue exploiting this motherland, that the people in Africa do not enjoy the mineral resources that their land has. The people in Africa are suffering. They don't have drugs just because someone else is selling out his own country to the enemy. Up to that time that all African presidents, all African leaders are going to open up their eyes, they are going to open up their ears, they are going to be more wise, they are going to wise up and take good policies into actions. They are going to be so good to take keen advice from some good pan-Africanists. Is when this continent is going to do better. If we continue in the same way, if we continue doing things in the division that we have in Africa. Now, I was born, I grew up and learned the history of Africa, which was a mixture of black and white history. The white history dominated the black history in my own country. Now, in the little history I learned in Africa about Africa and the black people, I learned that Africa has been having plans to unite and have Africa as a single country with a single currency and a single president with a single military base, or with a single military force, and actually have a very unified continent. They started talking this 80 years back, and they started talking this from the 1950s and 60s. Muammar Gaddafi came in power, started talking about this, they eliminated him. Anyone who has talked about this, anyone who has taken bold decisions to actually alienate themselves and cut links with the US and the Western countries, they have made a way in which they silenced them. So when we say that we want black unity, we don't want to be talking about something that we are not going to do. When we talk about black unity and we see the Sahel is uprising so fast, that the Sahel is bringing that example vibes, that the Sahel is setting standards in which all African leaders should go there and learn how to do things. They should go there, sit down, be lectured, and take notes as students, because they have messed this continent so much that we suffer a lot because someone somewhere sat down, went and signed a contract somewhere, and he got some money of which he shared with his friends, then at the expense of the people he perpetuates and of which he says he represents. We have said enough is enough. We are not going to take much orders from Macron, from the US president, from the Western countries. We want our countries to unify. We want black people to come together, work together. If we continue this way, we are not going to save our brothers and sisters in the diaspora. We are not going to set an example for them to come back home. Some of them may really want to come back home, but they see the division that still exists in Africa and they say, no, why should I go to such a divided continent when I'm here in oppression with so much division? Why should I move from one division to another division? So if we really want to do whatever we want to do in Africa, if we really mean our words, now one thing we all must accept and we all must do is acknowledge that Africa is divided, form a borderless Africa, all presidents to come together, choose one person who will represent them at the highest table, at the highest decision table. So this person will be responsible for all things that are happening in the continent, and he will be the leader of Africa, and we will have one currency, we will speak one language, we will call our African diaspora brothers to come back home, and we are going to build this continent. It will be one of the most powerful continents and one of the richest continents. What do we lack? We only lack unity in Africa. Thank you so much for having taken your time to watch this video. I appreciate so much. If it's your first time on this channel, please consider subscribing, sharing, liking, and commenting on this video.